Hank has been our superintendent for what, the last 5 years? 8. Time flies when you're having fun. Yes, and he's done such a wonderful job. You know, it's a very tough job being a superintendent with our school district with declining enrollment and everything. And I just am so thankful that he's for his 8 years that he's been here. So, Hank, as part of your final days of working in Ojai.
Thanks, Mike. Andy is handing out our agenda. Superintendent is nothing without paper. A couple of introductory comments. First of all, Steve, your moniker that you just approved of yourself reminds me of a great story. Back in the old days, you know, most superintendents taught at some point, and I was a social studies teacher back in the Watergate days and the days of Henry Kissinger. And there's a great story where after he was Secretary of State and was known quite well throughout the world, he was being interviewed by a bunch of young reporters who were just in awe of him. And one of them said, "Well, what should we call you, sir?" He said, "Is it doctor or is it secretary?" And I'm not going to try to do his voice, if you remember his voice, right? Gravelly and European. And he said, "Well, son, your excellency will do." My introduction today, first of all, I want to get a bit of business out of the way. I have been a member of the other club, that club that meets on Friday at noon for my 8 years, and that rounded out, I'm now rounding out 34 years as a Rotarian, finishing up. I may join a club down in Ventura, where I live, in the upcoming year or years. But timing is everything, and as I told a couple of people when we got here today, as I was pulling into the parking lot, I had the last of probably 20 messages from our son in Chicago, and we just had our 5th grandchild born about an hour and a half ago. So for that, who has the box? Where's that happy box thing? Happy bucks? $20 for our 5th grandchild and granddaughter, and she'll be waking up to a 3-year-old brother pretty soon. So I told Andy, having done numerous of these over the years, I was expecting about a half-hour time slot. Looks like we're right on schedule. And you'll be happy to know that when I was president, we were talking before, when I was president back a long time ago in New York, club president, the year before I did that, I was the program chair. And part of the job of the program chair was to make sure the speakers never, ever went past that deadline, whether it's 1:30 for the Rotary Club on Friday or 8:30. So if he or I are still talking at that time, I guarantee you we'll stop. And my nickname was the Hook. So I got that person off the stage right on time. So I promise you we'll do that. Second thing, as you can see from the material here, I'm finishing up these 8 years very soon, in a couple of weeks, and Andy will be starting. Immediately, I want to tell you just a bit about Andy and how he got to be superintendent. We had a long-time assistant superintendent for business who had been with the district almost 20 years, and she left a couple of years ago, and Andy started in May of 2015 as her successor. And it took me about a month to realize that he was a very special person, and I believed a long-time excellent superintendent wherever he might do that. And I just felt it was critical that he do it and start in Ojai. He had moved in with his young family, a son and a daughter, his wife. Grew up in Moore Park. He knows our area very well. He has a unique background for the superintendency. Has a law degree and an MBA from Washington University in St. Louis, which is very unique. Most people grow up like I did: teacher, assistant principal, principal, superintendent, educational administration, doctorate. But his background is unique, and I think particularly attuned to the job of the superintendency in the 21st century. So I went to the board, people like Linda Taylor, and said, I think the time has come for a change of leadership, and I will set aside my last 2 years of my contract, which would have run until 2019, on the condition that the board appoint Andy now. No search, and I was quite confident that he was the right person, and then, thankfully the board had some trust in me, and more importantly had trust in Andy. And so the last year we've been working together as superintendent designate and superintendent to be leaving, and I think we've had a great 1 year of working together on a number of subjects. So you can see then that I'll finish up my 8 years in a few weeks. Andy will start, and I hope we'll be here for quite a long time. The materials that you have in front of you, we don't have enough time to go over everything, but basically what I wanted to just re-emphasize was how we weathered the storm of particularly 2008, 9, 10, through about 2014-15, where because of declining enrollment, Mike mentioned that, because of declining enrollment and because of the state and national decline of revenues available for schools in general, we suffered through by far the greatest impact on our staff and our students in Ventura County in terms of reductions of revenues and therefore reductions of expenditures. Our staff and parents and students absorbed 40 furlough days in those years, by far the most in the county, and we were already dealing with a salary schedule for our staff that was in the bottom quartile of the county, and it got worse, and it won't be better in the years ahead. So you can just imagine the commitment of the people who work on our school district to our students and families, because many of them could be someplace else but chose to stay. You can see at the top of the first page, the back of the agenda, the general fund revenues, which plummeted in 2009 through 2011-12, a rebound about 3 years ago, but then you can see the projection for this coming year, this year now actually, because we start our official year on July 1st, is projected to drop by $1 million plus. You can see the enrollment decline. That 2816 in the bottom of the first column was 3,000 when I came in 2009 and was almost 4,200 students in 1997-98. That was the high point. So, a third of the enrollment dropped between 1997 and 2012, so 15 years or so, and you can see the projection is continuing to drop. Andy will talk about that. The next couple of pages will be his. He put together quite an impressive list of changes of people in leadership roles in the district in this coming year. And finally, I would say to you that, in my opinion, this is my own view of what came down the pike starting in 2010, where the National Governors Association met to talk about ways to maximize the possibility of ensuring equity across the United States in curricular experiences for students. You've all heard about Common Core. There are 2 pages, some that didn't come out so well on the Xeroxing, but if you ever have any questions about how we're implementing Common Core in Ojai, don't hesitate to call me or Andy or Cheryl Knox, who's the new assistant superintendent for educational services. I can just tell you, in my opinion, it's one of the most important and positive changes in my 40-plus years in this business. The ability now of our teachers to help students think about how to solve problems as opposed to just memorize facts and regurgitate them at some later point in time, I think is just a very significant improvement. I'd like to end by sort of going around the room real quickly and thanking people whom I know well because of their involvement in all things Ojai Unified School District in these 8 years. I'm just looking ahead and see Jim Halverson, who's way more than a doctor. He's our pitch man, by the way, for our Ojai Education Foundation breakfast every September and October. But more important than that, his involvement with our performing arts program has been spectacular. And even more important than that, he's Robin's husband. Right? So Robin keeps us going. Pat McPherson, I don't know how many conversations you and I have had about Ojai Flow and the relationship of Ojai Flow to the school district, but without Pat and a couple of other people, that remarkable initiative never would have happened. So congratulations, and I think you're finally almost past Golden State's legal issues. Looks like you are. Linda Burr, thank you very much for being on the foundation board, and Reggie, thank you for being part of our initiative 5+ years ago when we had our first 7-Eleven committee. Mike, it seems to me this is full circle now, right? When I came, one of the first meetings I attended was the Ojai Education Foundation Board, on which you sat, and we had some spirited conversations about the direction of that group. Lillian Talley was our Ojai Education Foundation Educator of the Year a couple of years ago, and so well deserved. Again, the music program couldn't be what it is without you. So thank you for your volunteer work, and now being part of the staff itself. And last but not least, Linda Taylor, who was president of the board when I came. Just thoroughly enjoyed working with her then, and she rotated back a few years later as president. And in my opinion, having now worked with probably 50 or 60 school board members over my 31 years as superintendent, Linda, you're right near the top. So congratulations, and thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you, Hank. For the next 3 weeks, we'll have a few opportunities for me to share some thoughts on Hank, so I won't say too much right now. But prior to coming to Ojai Unified, I worked for the Santa Barbara County Education Office, where I worked with all 20 school districts in Santa Barbara County. So I had an opportunity to work with 20 superintendents. In fact, a few of those districts had transitions while I was working with them, and so about 25 or so superintendents I was exposed to, as well as working in Moore Park Unified prior to that. And I can say that in my experience working with superintendents, that Ojai has just been so tremendously lucky, as I know each of you know over the past 8 years, to have had Hank as our leader. We have gone through some really challenging times, and I am certain that it took everyone from board members down to all of our staff and volunteers, but it was really also Hank's leadership that helped us get through that very challenging time. So on behalf of this community, Hank, again, I'll be saying much more, but want to thank you personally as well. So I'm passionate about our district. I could talk to you for hours about many topics, but I was given about 8 to 10 minutes, and so I'm going to try to give you a few quick answers to what I hear is the most commonly asked questions. First one is, haven't we over the past 5 to 6 years really seen an increase in funding in education across the state? And if so, why has that not trickled down to Ojai Unified and helped us more? The answer to the premise is absolutely that's correct. In education in California, we've seen an increase in funding of more than 40% since the recession was at its worst. Unfortunately, as Hank talked about already, our enrollment declines have eaten up that entire increase in revenue for us. And so when you look at the year-over-year changes, you see that we actually, while we certainly have benefited, have not had nearly that 40% increase that some of the other districts in this county that are in either flat enrollment or increasing enrollment really were able to experience. And so as a district with declining enrollment, we have some real challenges, and especially when people compare us to our neighbors that are just in a very different financial condition. The frequent question we get is, why do we have this declining enrollment? And that was one of the reasons why I actually broke down each of the individual grades. I know there's a lot of information on that enrollment chart, but the single biggest factor that determines how big our third grade class is how big they were as kindergartners 3 years earlier. Typically, once a student comes into our district, they're remaining with us. You'll see in this chart, we really don't have big changes year over year once a child is in our district. And so the real decline has come from the reality of the demographics of the valley. The county as a whole has an average age of about 35. The average age in the Ojai Valley is about 47. And so we just don't have as many families like mine. I have, as Hank said, a 3-year-old son and 2-year-old daughter. We don't have as many families who have young children who are in the district. So it's not a matter of the private schools taking all the kids or that they're going down the hill to Ventura. It really is a much larger issue as far as the demographics of the community. And so you can see that some of our cohorts in the secondary level are 200 plus students, but when you look at those lower elementary grades, we're looking at grade spans of about 160 to 180 students in each of those grades. So if you carry that forward, you'll see that Nordoff really has, we believe, hit its bottom and is really going to remain a school of around 700 students. But you see that we still have, unfortunately, a long way to go in the elementary schools as well as at Matilaha. We're looking at Matilaha, which once was a school of nearly 700 students, being down to around 350, 360. So unfortunately, we're not at the bottom just yet, and it is really just a matter of we have larger outgoing senior classes compared to the incoming kindergarten classes, cohorts. As Hank said, we've had quite a bit of change in the district just in the past 12 months. You can see some of the changes in that next page. We have the leadership changes between the start of this past school year and this upcoming school year, which starts on August 23rd. The one thing I'll point out that I'm quite proud of, though, is that you'll see that actually only one person from that list who is in a new role for next year is actually from not within our district. That's our new nutrition service manager, started a few months ago, Julie Chesson. Other than that, what you see is either internal promotion or simply a change of location, but the person's in the same role. So our elementary schools, as a result of Dr. Knox being promoted to assistant superintendent, we had a movement of the remaining principals, and so you see that, again, we have people in new locations, but we have just an incredibly strong staff that is staying with us as opposed to staff who are leaving. If you actually look back, though, to 3 years ago in 2014, if you were looking at a chart that was showing our leadership team as well as our school board, you'd see the changes just in 3 years. We have 4 out of the 5 school board members are new in the past 3 years. We also have 17 leadership positions in the district. That's principals, assistant principals, and then the non-instructional leadership roles like a leader of our business office or a leader of our nutrition services department. Of those 17 roles, only one person will be in the exact same role that they were in 3 years ago, and that's Catherine White as principal at Miramani. So again, we've gone through tremendous change in the past couple of years, but we really are an exciting next era for the district. And so look forward to getting to know each of you more as we continue to work to improve outcomes and opportunities for our students. In that vein, we also have some information on Measure J. As I'm sure you recall, Measure J was passed in 2014, $35 million bond. At that time, we had a group come out and take a look at the needs across the district, and what we found was that we had over $100 million in actual need, but we knew that the community was not going to support a bond that would actually generate that revenue, and so we asked our consultant, what would the community support, and they came up with that $35 million number. So unfortunately, it was not tied to need. It was about a third of the identified need that we have. We have been a little bit slow in getting the construction projects rolling. This summer, you'll see the projects we have already in progress. We'll end up having about $2 million spent by the end of the summer between last summer's projects and this summer's. But next summer is when we'll be really ramping up. We have slated about $8 million in construction for next summer. And that's really our plan for the next 3 to 5 years, is looking at somewhere between $6 and $8 million in construction across the district. Hank touched on Common Core a little bit. I apologize, the sheet didn't come out too well, but hopefully you can see some of the general changes. But it really is a seismic shift in the way that curriculum is being developed for public education in California. We talked about the changes that our district's experienced in the past 3 years. In the past 5, we've had new curriculum for the first time in really a generation, a completely new way of approaching curriculum. As well as a completely different focus on funding, which was the first time in 40 years that we had that new funding model, the local control funding formula you may have heard of. And then the accountability mechanism as well as something that just now is being rolled out. And so when you look at accountability, funding, and instruction, really seismic shifts in the state of California and of course in our district as well over the past 5 years. So the theme, as I am wrapping up the prepared comments, and Hank and I will have a period of Q&A, is just that we really are in a state of being on the tail end of some significant changes, both in California education as well as in our school district. But I think that as we are finally through all those changes, that we really do see that we are in an exciting period to really address some of the new challenges that we have in our district. So with that, I'm not going to presume to know what each of you have as questions, so we'll again have about 10 minutes or so where we will be available to answer any questions you have about the district.
The question I get asked is, why isn't Ojai Unified become part of Ventura?
give you
first
that
step.
Actually, and Linda probably could reference a conversation or two before 2009, I'm sure, because it didn't just start when I came. But about a year after I was here, that issue was raised. Former superintendent, who'd been there, actually retired a couple of years ago, Trudy Arriaga, and I had a conversation. And I guess the best way I can put it, Mike, is that it takes two to tango. Right? There were some people in Ojai who probably correctly thought that because of the infrastructure opportunities, right, that we could just go a little past Oakview, they could go a little past Oakview, and we could be their northern section, right, of the school district. Numerically, they have about 17,500 students. Put our 2,500, it's a nice round number of 20,000. However, to be very honest with you, we don't bring very much to them, right? So you know about our financial condition, and therefore they would be doing us a rather large financial favor if we did incorporate. And it does take two to tango, and I don't believe that there's that interest on the part of Ventura. And frankly, as I talked with people over the years, I don't think there's much of an interest in the part of Ojai. People like our independence and our special nature. We are quite a bit smaller than any of the other unit districts, K-12 districts in the county. The next largest would be Fillmore at about 3,700, so 50% larger than we are, on up to Simi Valley of 20,000 students. So we're special, and in that respect, I think most people would like us to stay that way, albeit we could eliminate people like a superintendent and maybe an assistant superintendent and a few other infrastructure positions, but that's not enough, in my opinion, to cause a merger. Pat?
I don't know if this still exists, but I know when my kids went to school, the Ohio district did not include Oakview. Does it include Oakview today?
It does not. Oakview, yeah.
Is there any way to make the whole valley part of it? That seems
Yeah.
to me that's how you can get more enrollment
Right.
and also keep it together.
Yeah.
Because I remember when we were looking for houses, we didn't pick Oakview because it didn't have this school district.
Well, Oakview now is the northernmost part of the Ventura School District, right? That's point number one. Point number two, being part of the valley, obviously the kids grow up together, and I think that's become, more than anything else, the initiative for so many Oakview students coming to our school district. Andy can give you the numbers because we've talked about it a lot, but without Oakview and without those Ventura students coming to us, who represent pretty close to 10% of our total population, because we have open boundaries. We have some going down to Ventura for reasons, but the net coming to our school district is significant. And also, they've made some important changes. Sunset School was a K-6 school. They were losing a lot of students from the Ventura School District to Matilaha, and so a number of years ago, they expanded to K-8. So they've been able to keep some of those 7th and 8th graders. Have a fabulous principal who actually is very involved with the Ojai School District. And, I think, as I was saying to Mike, there's a general level of comfort with Oakview being part of the Ventura School District, albeit those who choose to come to us, particularly some for junior high and definitely for high school and elementary, they like the choice. And I think my guess is that's where it'll stay.
Can you explain district of choice?
Sure. Andy, will you do that here? He knows.
So as Hank said, we receive about 10% of our student population from outside the district boundaries. There's two different mechanisms legally that they can come to our district. One is just simply an inter-district transfer request where both the sending district, in most cases Ventura Unified, as well as the receiving district approve that transfer. That's how nearly all of the students do come to Ojai Unified. We have a reciprocal agreement with Ventura. And so we have that movement between the two districts. You may have seen recently in the Star, there's an editorial and there's been a number of articles about district of choice, which is a separate legal mechanism that students are able to come to Ojai Unified, as well as there's two other districts in Ventura County that are designated district of choice. District of choice allows that any family that wants to send their students to Ojai Unified can come even if the sending district doesn't approve it, so long as they apply by January 1st. So in the case of Santa Paula Unified, when they unified back in 2013, and they had a change in policy of saying they really wanted to hold on to their students and not allow some of the students who were previously coming up the hill to Summit, they were holding on to those students. But we can still actually have Santa Paula students come to Ojai, even if Santa Paula is not willing to sign that document releasing them, as long as that student or that family gets the application in time. So that's the district of choice. For us, it really is not that big of a factor in our enrollment, but a district like Oak Park over on the other side of the county gets nearly 40% of their enrollment through district of choice.
Two quick questions, Andy. One, status of 6, 7, 8 Matilla, making a middle school, 3 grade. And currently, are we on an ebb for closing an elementary school? I'm sure it'll come up again, but is that process at least not active at the moment? Or Hank?
I'll let Andy answer it, but Andy, just a primer on the protocols of Rotary, right? When the person running the meeting, usually the president, but not always, leaves his or her seat and comes up to the front, that's like, the old, you got 2 minutes, right? It's like when you're trying to get all the activities within that act of the play, right? You got 2 minutes. We got. He's really good. Yeah. I did it. I told you I was the hook. Okay. We have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
All right. I will try to answer as quickly as I can then. Topic of 6-8, Matilaha, I absolutely believe that's going to be something that is going to be looked at soon. It's ultimately a board decision. We just had an article in the OVN that was prompted in part by some of the comments that Hank made at his last board meeting in June that really was encouraging this board to take a look at whether or not now is the time. As a reminder, we had a committee come together, a 20-member committee made up of community members and staff just a few years ago who 17-3 or somewhere in that ratio supported a 6-8 configuration. In fact, there's only 5 7-8 configurations left in the entire state. It really is not the norm. But at that time, they said that there's a cost component to it and that we were still in that period of 40 furlough days. And it just was not going to be the right time to incur a new cost of moving the students. But we are now in our 3rd year of having a budget reserve. We've had 2 consecutive years of full instructional calendar year, as well as pay raises for our staff. We've had significant reductions in class sizes, so I think that maybe now is a time to at least address the question again, and we'll see where it leads. As far as the elementary school discussion, we assembled another committee to look at that just a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. They voted by majority to keep all schools open. The board accepted that recommendation, and they really poured through the topic as well, and ultimately came to a consensus that they too would support keeping all schools open. And at the time, the decision was for the foreseeable future. So their desire is not to bring or at least the board at that time, which of course, every 2 years we have elections and new boards come in. But at that time, the commitment was really that it was not desired to bring this issue back up a year or 2 from now, that it was intended to be something to give stability for the foreseeable future.
Okay, witching hour. Thank you very much.